"You don't belong in this suite. I don't care what your reservation says. People like you don't stay in the Harrington." The words landed across the marble lobby of the Harrington Grand Hotel like a glass dropped on tile. Everyone heard them. No one moved. Naomi Reeves stood at the front desk with her overnight bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand. She was 38 years old, wearing dark jeans, a grey pullover and clean white sneakers. No luggage cart behind her, no assistant hovering nearby, no diamonds catching the chandelier light, just a woman who had walked in from the street and asked for her room. The man behind the desk was Garrett Ashmore, 44, senior front desk manager at the Harrington Grand in downtown Chicago. He had worked in luxury hospitality for 19 years. He wore his authority like a second uniform. Crisp, pressed, impossible to question. And when Naomi had approached the desk and given her name, something in his face had shifted. A small recalibration. A silent decision made before a single keystroke. "I have a confirmed reservation," Naomi said. Her voice was even, not cold exactly, precise. Garrett's fingers hovered over his keyboard. "What name is the reservation under?" "Reeves. Naomi Reeves." He typed slowly. His eyes moved across the screen, then away, too quickly. "I'm not seeing anything." Naomi reached into the front pocket of her bag and produced a printed confirmation. She set it on the counter between them without drama. The paper was crisp. The room number was printed clearly. The suite number, 1401. The rate, $4,200 per night. Garrett looked at it the way a man looks at a parking ticket he intends to dispute. "There may have been a system error," he said. "There wasn't," Naomi replied. From a velvet armchair near the fireplace, a woman looked up from her champagne. Her name was Constance Whitmore, 62, a retired federal lobbyist who spent 3 months a year at the Harrington because she liked the way the staff remembered her name. She had booked into suite 1401 every autumn for 11 years, even when she wasn't technically confirmed for it. The suite existed in her mind as a personal possession. A place the world had agreed to hold for her indefinitely. When she'd arrived an hour ago and been told the suite was already reserved, she'd made 2 phone calls. One to the hotel's general manager, who was conveniently unavailable. One to Garrett Ashmore, who was never unavailable to Constance Whitmore. Now, she sat watching from a tasteful distance, one ankle crossed over the other, her champagne glass tilted in the precise way of a woman waiting for a problem to solve itself. Garrett straightened his jacket. "Miss Reeves, we have a wonderful room on the 11th floor. Same square footage, nearly identical." "Suite 1401, Naomi said. "That's what I reserved. The suite has a complication this evening." "What kind of complication?" Garrett paused. He was good at pauses. He used them the way a surgeon uses anesthesia to make the patient cooperative before the incision. "A valued long-term guest has a long-standing arrangement with that suite. We do our best to honor. Is her name on my confirmation?" He looked at the paper again, though he already knew the answer. "No." "Then there is no complication," Naomi said. Constance set down her champagne and rose from the chair. She was tall, angular, dressed in a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She crossed the lobby with the confidence of someone who had spent decades walking into rooms that immediately reorganized themselves around her. "Excuse me," she said, arriving beside Garrett as though he were a prop she was adjusting. She did not look at Naomi. She spoke about her. "Garrett, I've been coming to this hotel since before the renovation. You know my arrangement." Garrett nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore." Now Constance turned her gaze to Naomi. The gaze was not hostile exactly. It was something more corrosive. It was assessment. A long, slow read of a person to determine their social weight. Naomi's sneakers, Naomi's bag, Naomi's total absence of ornamentation. The quiet confidence that Constance registered not as dignity, but as ignorance of how things worked. "I'm sure there's been a mix-up," Constance said, her voice warm with manufactured patience. These things happen with online bookings. I imagine you found a deal somewhere? Naomi looked at her for the first time. Her eyes were steady. I booked directly. Well. Constance smiled in the way that wasn't a smile. The Harrington takes care of its real guests. Garrett will find something suitable for you. Naomi turned back to Garrett. My confirmation number is on that paper. I'd like my key. Garrett's phone buzzed quietly on the counter. He glanced at it. A text from the concierge supervisor. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he picked up the desk phone and turned slightly away, lowering his voice. Nearby, a young man sat in a corner armchair, nursing a sparkling water and scrolling his phone. His name was Marcus Oyalaran, 24, a journalism grad student at Northwestern. He was in the lobby waiting for a friend who was running 40 minutes late. He had been pretending to look at Instagram for the past 3 minutes. He was actually watching everything. His thumb hovered over the record button. He knew what he was seeing. He had grown up in Hyde Park with a mother who could strip the wallpaper off any room's pretension by simply walking into it. He had watched her present her credit card at restaurants, her faculty ID at university functions, her insurance card at urgent care, and every single time, that pause, that fractional hesitation before the world decided whether to accommodate her. He pressed record. Garrett returned the phone to its cradle. His face had reset itself into smooth professional neutrality. Mrs. Reeves, I've spoken with our accommodations team. Given the circumstances, we feel it's best to relocate you to our executive floor. It's a complimentary upgrade in terms of, I didn't ask to be relocated. The situation is. What is the situation exactly? Naomi asked. Because I have a confirmation for Suite 1401. I arrived during the check-in window. My payment cleared 3 weeks ago. She paused. Is there a reason I'm being asked to move that has nothing to do with my reservation? The lobby went quiet in the way lobbies go quiet when the background music hasn't changed, but everyone has stopped pretending to ignore what's happening. Constance stiffened. This is really quite unnecessary. She asked a simple question, said a voice from across the lobby. It belonged to a woman in her late 60s with grey braids and a rolling suitcase. Her name was Dorothy Chance, 67, a retired schoolteacher from Detroit who had saved for 2 years to celebrate her 40th wedding anniversary at the Harrington. She had been waiting to check in 4 people behind Naomi and had watched every moment unfold. Dorothy did not raise her voice. She simply stopped pretending not to have ears. Constance looked at her with polished displeasure. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me that a woman with a valid reservation is being shuffled around like she showed up without one, Dorothy said. That concerns me very much. Garrett cleared his throat. Ma'am, I assure you this is a routine. Routine for who? Dorothy asked. Marcus kept his phone steady, angled slightly to catch the full desk. Garrett made his decision. He could feel Constance Whitmore's expectation pressing against his back like a hand. She had brought 10 colleagues to the Harrington for a charity gala last year. She had written a glowing profile piece about the hotel in a magazine, with a circulation of 40,000. She had, on at least 2 occasions, slipped him an envelope at the end of her stay that was warm and thick, and this woman in sneakers had walked in from nowhere with a printed piece of paper. Miss Reeves, he said carefully, I'm going to need to verify a few additional details before I can proceed with check-in. Ah, what details? Standard protocol for premium suites. You haven't asked anyone else for additional verification. He didn't answer that. He couldn't. Naomi's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. A message from her assistant, Keisha Drummond. Board is assembled. 15 minutes. Naomi placed her phone face down on the counter. Not yet. There were things Garrett Ashmore did not know. He did not know that Naomi Reeves was the founder and executive chair of Reeves Capital Group, a private equity firm managing $6.3 billion in assets. He did not know that the Harrington Grand's parent company, Elara Hospitality Holdings had been in quiet negotiations with Reeves Capital for the past 8 months over a restructuring partnership that could save Elara from its 3rd consecutive year of declining returns. He did not know that the woman he was trying to redirect to the 11th floor was scheduled to sit across from Elara's board in less than 20 minutes in the private meeting room on the 14th floor, directly adjacent to Suite 1401. He did not know, but he would. Naomi folded her confirmation paper once cleanly and returned it to her bag. "I'll wait," she said. She walked to a chair near the window and sat down. She opened her laptop. The screen cast a pale rectangle of light across her face. She worked with the focus of someone for whom time was already money already spent. Constance watched this with visible irritation. She leaned toward Garrett and spoke behind her palm. "Just give me the key, Garrett. I'll sort it out with management later." Garrett hesitated 1 second too long. Constance's eyes sharpened. "Is that going to be a problem?" He reached for the key card. Naomi looked up from her laptop. "Mr. Ashmore." He stopped. "I'd like to speak with the general manager, please." Garrett's hand paused over the keycard drawer. "Mr. Colfax is unavailable this evening." "He was unavailable an hour ago as well," Naomi said. "Please let him know Naomi Reeves is requesting him at the front desk, and please let him know it's time-sensitive." She returned her eyes to her screen. Constance exhaled through her nose. "This is genuinely absurd," she said, just loud enough. Dorothy, still standing near the line with her rolling suitcase, looked at Constance and said nothing. She didn't have to. The look was enough. Marcus was still recording. The general manager arrived 7 minutes later, not because Garrett had called him, but because his assistant had forwarded him a text message from a member of the Elara Holdings board who had just received a notification that Naomi Reeves had not yet checked in. His name was Philip Colfax, 51, 17 years in hospitality management, 2 of them at the Harrington. He was trim, efficient and pale in a way that suggested he had just understood something. He dearly wished he had understood an hour ago. He came through the door behind the front desk, still straightening his jacket. His eyes found Naomi immediately. Something crossed his face. A recognition. Not of her face, but of the name. He had seen it in the partnership brief. He had seen it in the Elara Holdings memo titled Strategic Guest, Confirm Suite 1401, Priority Access. The memo had been distributed 3 days ago to every manager on the floor, including Garrett Ashmore. Philip crossed the lobby. His footsteps were measured but fast. He stopped in front of Naomi and extended his hand. "Mrs. Reeves, I'm Philip Colfax, general manager. I owe you a direct apology." Naomi shook his hand. She didn't stand. "I'd like my room, Mr. Colfax." He nodded. He turned toward Garrett. What passed between them wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning conducted entirely through eye contact. Garrett's face had taken on the careful blankness of a man counting his exits. "Key for Suite 1401, Philip said quietly. "Now, please." Constance Whitmore stepped forward. "Philip, this is a long-standing arrangement, surely, Mrs. Whitmore." He turned to her. His voice was courteous and absolutely final. "Suite 1401 is occupied. We'll have your usual arrangements confirmed on the 12th floor, immediately." He paused. "Complimentary, of course." Constance's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all evening she had nothing that would work. Not her name, not her history, not her tone. The room had reorganized itself, and the new center wasn't her. She looked at Naomi once more, this time without assessment, with something that might, eventually, become understanding, though it hadn't gotten there yet. She turned and walked back to her chair. Her back was very straight. Her champagne glass sat untouched on the end table. Garrett produced the key card with hands that were not quite steady. He set it on the counter. Naomi picked it up, placed it in her bag, and stood. "Thank you," she said to Philip. She did not say it to Garrett. As she crossed the lobby toward the elevator, Dorothy caught her eye and gave her one slow nod. The kind that carries a whole history. Naomi returned it. In the corner, Marcus Oyeleran lowered his phone. His friend had just texted that he was outside. Marcus looked at his screen. At the footage, at the 43 minutes of video that ended with a woman walking to an elevator with her room key and her dignity, he typed a caption. He thought about it, deleted it, tried again. Black woman with valid reservation at Chicago's Harrington Grand, denied her suite so a white regular guest could have it. Watch what happened when management finally showed up. At Harrington Grand, at Elara Hospitality. Explain this. He tagged 3 journalists he followed, 2 civil rights accounts, 1 hotel industry watchdog. His thumb hovered. He pressed post. The video went live at 8:47 in the evening. By 9:30, it had been viewed 80,000 times. By midnight, it had passed 700,000. By the time Naomi Reeves sat down in the Harrington's private meeting room on the 14th floor to face the Elara Holdings board, a headline was already running on 2 national news sites. You don't belong in this suite. Viral video shows, Black woman denied hotel room for white VIP at Chicago's Harrington Grand. Inside the meeting room, 8 board members sat around a long mahogany table. Some of them had seen the video before Naomi walked in. All of them had seen it by the time she opened her portfolio. The board chair, a man named Theodore Grange, 64, who had spent 30 years in corporate real estate and thought himself unflappable, looked at Naomi with the expression of someone who had just understood that the floor beneath them has been a ledge. "Miss Reeves," he began, "before we proceed with the restructuring proposal, I want to acknowledge." "I know," Naomi said. He stopped. She opened her portfolio and placed 3 documents on the table. "These are the materials I prepared. They cover Reeves Capital's proposed stake in Elara Holdings, the operational reform framework, and the conditions under which we're prepared to move forward." She smoothed the top sheet. "I'd like to add a 4th condition this evening." No one spoke. Full accountability review of the incident downstairs, not a quiet resolution. Not a transferred employee, a documented, public, third-party review of the Harrington Grand's guest treatment protocols and the specific actions of the staff involved tonight. Theodore leaned forward. "Mrs. Reeves, we are deeply." "Mr. Grange." She looked at him directly. "I've been in this industry long enough to know what deeply troubled sounds like when it means please, don't pull your money out. That's not what I'm asking for." A woman at the far end of the table, the board's chief operating officer, Sacha Nguyen, 47, pressed her hands flat on the table. She was the only person in the room who had worked her way up from a front desk position herself. 20 years ago, in a hotel in Sacramento, she knew exactly what had happened downstairs. She had known it the moment she'd read the text from Philip Colfax. "What are you asking for?" Sacha said quietly. Naomi looked at her. She had noticed Sacha the moment she walked in. The way she sat, slightly forward, like someone who had earned their seat by showing up early. "I'm asking for the same thing I asked for downstairs," Naomi said. "My room, which I paid for, which I was entitled to, treated exactly the same as everyone else who walks into that lobby." She paused. "That's the minimum. It should also be the standard." The silence that followed was not the silence of disagreement. It was the silence of people recognizing a truth they had been comfortable enough to ignore. Theodore looked down at his hands. Sacha looked at Naomi. The other board members looked at the table, at their phones, at the middle distance where accountability lives before it becomes unavoidable. In the lobby below, Constance Whitmore was still seated near the fireplace. She had ordered a 2nd glass of champagne and not touched it. Her phone was lighting up with messages from people who had seen the video. Some of them she knew personally. Some of them were journalists. One was her own daughter, who had texted only 3 words. "Mum." "Is that you?" Constance stared at the elevator doors as if Naomi Reeves might walk back through them. As if there might be another conversation available to her. One where things went differently. There wasn't. Garrett Ashmore stood behind the front desk, managing the check-in line with careful professional attention. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. It was in the moment he'd reached for that key card. The moment he'd decided that the name on the confirmation mattered less than the face behind it. The moment he'd taken the folded bills from Constance Whitmore's envelope the previous month and told himself it was just hospitality, just taking care of guests who deserved it. He had told himself that so many times it had started to sound like policy. His phone buzzed, a message from HR asking him to come upstairs after his shift. Not a question, a summons. A summons. Laura, no. He didn't think about the money. He thought about the moment Naomi had asked, "Is there a reason I'm being asked to move that has nothing to do with my reservation?" And he had not answered, because the honest answer would have required a kind of courage he had spent 19 years quietly avoiding. Dorothy Chance had been given her room on the 8th floor. She stood at her window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, the river glittering below, and thought about her mother, who had once been turned away from a hotel in Birmingham because the sign on the door said, what signs used to say, unashamed. Her mother had stood on that sidewalk with her suitcase and not cried. She had walked 2 blocks to the other place, the one that would have her, and she had laid her dress out for the morning and slept and woken up and continued. Still going? Dorothy said to no one, to her reflection in the glass, to her mother's memory. Still going. In suite 1401, Naomi Reeves sat on the edge of the bed after midnight. The city spread out below the window in grids of orange and white light. She had her shoes off, her laptop was open on the desk. The board had voted. The conditions had been accepted. The restructuring would move forward with the accountability review as a contractual requirement, not a courtesy. Philip Colfax had called to apologize personally. He had sounded like a man rehearsing a harder conversation with himself. Keisha had sent a news roundup, 14 outlets. The video was at 2.1 million views. A civil rights attorney had already issued a statement. 3 former Harrington employees had come forward with similar stories. Naomi had read them all, sitting still in the quiet of the room she had paid for. She read every account of every person who had stood in a lobby or a doorway or a line and been made to prove that their receipt was real. She thought about her father. He'd worked nights for 22 years as a security guard at a bank in Atlanta. He used to say, "Don't make them comfortable with their assumptions. Make them accountable for their actions." There's a difference. She had not fully understood that difference until she was old enough to have people making assumptions about her. Now she understood it completely. She opened her email and typed a note to Raymond Kessler, her legal counsel. Short, clear. 4 sentences. Preserve all hotel records, communications, and surveillance footage from this evening. Initiate contact with the 3 former employees who came forward. Prepare a public accountability letter from Reeves Capital. Do not frame this as a personal grievance. Frame it as a systemic standard. She hit send. Then she closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. The city burning orange below her. Quiet in the way that cities get quiet, when they don't know yet what they've started. She was not the first person this had happened to. She knew that. She did not want to be treated differently because of who she was. She wanted to be treated the same as everyone should have been. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. 3 weeks later, the Harrington Grand closed for a 5-day internal review, its first in 6 years. Garrett Ashmore's employment was terminated, pending an investigation that also examined 2 prior guest complaints filed against him in the previous 18 months and quietly shelved. Philip Colfax resigned and issued a public letter that did not use the word mistake once, which people noticed and respected. Constance Whitmore did not return to the Harrington, not because she was banned, though the review was ongoing, but because something had shifted in her that she did not have language for yet. She sat in her house in Winnetka and read the accounts of the former employees and the other guests. and she thought about all the times a room had adjusted itself around her arrival, and she had never once wondered what it had adjusted away from. It was a slow and uncomfortable process. That was appropriate. Marcus Oyeleran received a journalism fellowship the following spring. In his application essay, he wrote about what it meant to press record, about the difference between witnessing and participating, about how silence in a lobby is its own kind of vote. Dorothy Chance and her husband celebrated their anniversary at the Harrington as planned. On the last morning, she left a handwritten note at the front desk. It was not addressed to management. It was addressed to whoever cleaned the rooms, to the people whose names no one ever thought to learn. She thanked them. She said she saw them. The note was found by a housekeeper named Alma, who had worked at the Harrington for 11 years, who folded it and kept it in her locker, who took it home and read it to her daughter that night. And Naomi Reeves signed the restructuring agreement on a Tuesday afternoon in a conference room in New York. Before she signed, she said one thing to the assembled board. "This will only work if it changes what happens when no one important is watching." She signed. Then she took her copy, put it in her bag, and walked out into the afternoon. Just a woman in jeans and sneakers, moving through a city that didn't know her name, carrying more than it could see. That had always been enough. She had learned a long time ago that you don't need the world to know your worth. You just need to know it yourself and refuse to move.